Hi, I'm Mark Berry, broadcast and social media coordinator for the KIJHL. I'm also the play-by-play voice of the Campbell River Storm of the VIJHL. And I thought I'd put together or share how I prepare for a hockey game, and bearing in mind that I'm a little older, so my memory's not as good, so I need lots and lots of notes, and I do have extra time that maybe other broadcasters don't have. So it's not necessarily what you have to do, it's how I prepare for a game, and hopefully you get a couple of tips from it. It's certainly nothing I've created on my own. It's been the work of an awful lot of broadcasters before me, and I've taken some of the good aspects of what they showed me over the years. This is a media kit for the Oceanside Generals and the Campbell River Storm back in February. And first off, about the media kit, our website is really cool in that there is a media kit inside each day for each broadcast, and it's not easily accessible, and that's the problem. You can't just go in back a house and get it because you also have access to other sensitive areas. But if you don't have access to it, certainly your general manager does, or your head coach does, whoever puts the bios for the players, and they can print this up for you the day of the game. It's not available before the day of the game, but the day of the game they can print it up and get it to you, and it's really, really impressive. So this is my binder for every game. First off, I take a snapshot of every player from the website, put it on a sheet of paper so that I can memorize who's who. My biggest issue is as I get older, I'm not as good with names and pictures as I was before. One hockey player looks like another to me. So I put this together so that it's within a couple of weeks, I can recognize everybody on the bus that I see or when they're passing by, because, you know, when you see them with their cage, it's hard to see who's inside. So I do that. This we'll talk about later. It's something I pull off of Instat. But let's go straight to the media kit and what the media kit offers. It's got a great special teams report, basically just the typed in spots, and then I fill in the rest with stats that I accumulated from elsewhere in the media report, from Instat, and from my personal notes as well. Head-to-head, how these two teams compete against each other on the power play. Oceanside, in this case, on the road, what's their power play, what's their penalty kill. At home, how does the home team play? And then how the two teams are doing in a regular season. Who's leading score-wise on power play goals and shorthanded goals. And then I also will put other interesting stats like since January 1st, this is a 6-week period, the Storm were 40.82% on the power play. The Generals are up at 38%. So just stats that you can add into your broadcast. The report also comes up with head-to-head stats, and one of the good ones is how the individual players have played against the opposition through the course of the year. And you can see Carter Johnson, in this case, 12 points in 4 games against the Storm during the previous encounters. And then I make it nice and big so I can get some key points out of it, but you don't have to do that part of it. Also in that section, how these two teams fare when leading, when tied, when losing after 1 or 2 periods. And in this case, Oceanside 26-1-3, leading after 1. The Storm 22-0 if they're leading after 1 period of play. I also track when the home team scores first or concedes first, and that's something I track on a separate spreadsheet and add to it. And then also more head-to-head stuff, how these two teams are doing, their plus minuses. I can look at that, last 5 games, who's leading their home power play, their road power play, all that sort of stuff is there as well. There's also streaks, player streaks in the league, and I can take a look at that. I pull the report, I take a look and look at the two teams that are competing that night and get some interesting talking points for the broadcast. Also on the stats, of course, the usual each team and the individual scores on each team, and then I'll transfer that over nice and big so I can see how many goals Carter DeBoer has got, 26 at this point. Also, I'll add to this page from another report that comes out of the same report, game-winning goals, who's leading the team in game-winning goals. Same with the Generals, I did the same thing there. The rosters for the two teams, hometowns, that sort of stuff, that's all there. And then standings. And I also get, this is where my intro is on how the two teams, how I intro into the broadcast, their records, last 10 games, how they're playing at home, how they're playing on the road, that sort of thing. And then I also track how they're doing in the league and how they're doing in the province. And that's why I've got down here, I've got Oceanside had the best record at that point at 881. The Storm had the fourth best record. And then I wanted to fill it in with Langley and Princeton, who were number 2 and number 3 in the province. Still with the standings, the VIJHL has a different style of playoff format in that the top 3 teams in each division advance, and then the next 2 best records also advance to the playoffs. So starting at about December, January, we start tracking where the number 7 and 8 teams are and who's in the hunt for a playoff spot. I do that on a weekly basis as well. And then upcoming games, and you can also look back at all the scores previously. And with Oceanside also, just a note to myself, remember to pitch the fact that they're on 88.5 The Beach as well. Same with the Campbell River Storm. And then VI leaders here, which is the leaders at that point of the season, scoring leaders, goaltenders, rookies, and defensemen. This is also something that I do with this section here, something I learned from another broadcaster who does a radio broadcast when he's trying to fill the intermissions. What he'll do is he'll pre-record the leaders in the VIJHL, do a 6 or 7 minute segment pre-recorded so that, again, he can play that during the intermission and not have dead air, but still take a bit of a break. So that's it from the from the Hockey Tech stuff that's part of the website. Hockey Tech is a really good feature. I encourage you to use it. This portion here is from Instat, and I have access to Instat with my hometown Campbell River Storm. So I'm able to pull Instat cool stats like face-off percentage wins. And it's so cool when somebody's taking a face-off and you can say that, Carter DeVore is 56% in the face-off circle this season. Plus and minus, the same thing, pretty cool. Time on ice, who's getting all the minutes, leading hitters, block shots, passes to the slot, which is a stat I really like, penalties drawn, who draws penalties, and then Instat index, which is basically who's the best players on each of the teams. I also, from previous websites, I'll go back in history on this date, and not just do this date in NHL history, but this date in history for these two teams. What they were playing 5 years ago. Oceanside beat Comox that night 3-0. I can give them the goal scorers and the winning goaltenders. And sometimes it's just nice to throw in some names from the past. Then I'll also do birthdays, going back through. I've got kind of a file that I keep stats like that from year to year, and what former Storm players are celebrating a birthday, how old they are. In this case, on February 10th, Kyle Williamson, who was really special back in 2004, 2005, 38 years old that day. It's kind of cool to be able to throw that around and then say where these guys finished off their careers. Like, Scott played with Marian University, NCAA Div 3, and Kyle went on to play with the Sycamoose Eagles of the KIJHL. Notes like 7th skater, that sort of stuff. And then, not so important this year, I kept a list, and this stays in the book the entire year, BCHL affiliates for the Storm. I do likewise for the other teams, but I'll contact the broadcaster and ask them who's affiliated with somebody else, and then I'll just have that on a separate piece of paper. I track the 20-year-olds starting in about January and just talk about them whenever I can, and then I just keep those stats up to date. Community partner mentions, traditional territories, that sort of thing, so that I don't forget doing it. And then I can throw in some sponsor mentions during the course of the game. Some rules that this is from last year. I pretty much know it, but I wanted to make sure that I mentioned the new playoff format whenever I could. And then any rules that come along. So that's kind of how I do the binder. So I use the binder. I don't have a lot of space where I do the broadcast. I used to take all these guys and then stick them up on the wall, but the binder seems to work out really well for me. The other thing I do is the rosters. I had some eyesight issues that were rectified with surgery this past year, but I couldn't see. Too well. So the rosters are often quite small. So I would redo the rosters in a format where I could actually see them. And it also allowed me to memorize them. Again, my memory is not what it used to be. So anything I could do to help me remember the names so that I'm not looking down at my sheet the whole game was really beneficial. I kept it. I color coded. The reds are for the 20-year-olds. The purples in this case are for the APs and or rookies. These are just the APs. Early on in the season, it's the rookies. I also wrote down the officials for the game. With the clipboard, which I carry with me the entire broadcast, I also do a game sheet. This is something that Alex Ronsley, the voice of the former voice of the Powell River Kings, had put together, and I use this on a regular basis. Most broadcasters use a form of this, so I have this. Write down the goals, all that sort of stuff. And then I can also refer back to them if I think there's been a mistake made. Power plays, any sponsor mentions I need to remember, shots on goal, and room for notes. And this is really a godsend, particularly when you're doing a recap later in the game and the website goes, or you can't get access to the website because because hockey arenas are notorious for bad reception. I also record the scratches for the game, head coaches, that sort of thing, trainers, stats on the goaltenders, which I keep up on a regular basis. And then part of my clear clipboard has the lineups for the two teams so that I can refer to it quickly. So that's kind of how I do my stats. And again, this is overkill for most people, but because I'm a little older and I don't remember things so great, it's really helpful for me, and I do have the time. I make the time to make this happen. For me, the worst thing in the world is if I go into a broadcast and don't feel prepared. To be honest, I don't use half of what I prepare, but what I believe it does is it permits me to be confident going into the broadcast, knowing that I'll be fine if something happens and I have to fill it with air. I don't like dead air. I hate dead air, as a matter of fact. So I will talk. I'll be a talking head if I need to be, just to make the broadcast flow without that dead air spot. So this is kind of how I prepare. Hopefully it's helpful for you. It's a culmination of every other broadcaster that I've ever worked with, all their good points, and hopefully it's helpful.